Hello, Julie. Glad to see you on. How's it going tonight, Dr. Perry? Hey, Shelly. Well, we got some good news from our Governor Polis today in that we're going to be able to get our office fully reopened and functioning normally again. Well, normally isn't probably the right word for it. Hey, Carol. But good news because they're starting to lift the order that's going to start on Monday, the 27th. So those of you that are waiting for haircuts and stuff like that, I would potentially start calling and getting your appointments made because there are going to be rules. Quite frankly, there are most of the rules that we were following prior to the stay-at-home order, which is social distancing, keeping the groups lower, in our line of work, making sure that tables are being cleaned in between patients and all that kind of stuff. So all the precautions and everything that we were taking and we've been doing. So all of those things are great. How's it going, Leslie? Good news for that. And I know from speaking with some people that maybe the hairstylists and those places may be the things that people are going to be going to do first. One of my friends had told me that we're getting dangerously close to knowing who's everybody's natural hair color, what their natural hair color really is. And I think that's a pretty true statement. So some good news that happened today. We're all excited to be able to roll out and really ramp up and just get to talk to more people, serve more people, and most importantly, just keep making strong people. So tonight, our topic is in our series on Stronger People Are Harder to Kill is going to dive into toxicity and the effects of toxicity on the body. And so I want to start off by talking a little bit about stuff that we've talked about in the past. The first video, we kind of went a little deeper dive into that germ theory, terrain theory. And one of the reasons why I want to bring this back up is because in the terrain theory, there was actually a very, Beauchamp had a very strong consideration to toxicity in the cell and the cellular fluid around it as being one of the primary reasons why the cell would become in a weakened state. So again, I feel like what the inspiration for this whole series was just the fact that with coronavirus and COVID-19, that hello Davida, that we've been in a position to really show people that how you treat your body on a day-to-day basis, whether or not we're having comorbidities, whether or not we're quote unquote healthy versus not healthy, really has been the determining factor of how somebody does. A great example, there was a report out of New York City with some women who had given birth from like March 22nd to April 4th. And so they came in and they tested all of them for coronavirus before giving birth to see if they were going to have to do anything with maybe the newborn babies. And interestingly enough, there was I think it was 18% or some number of women actually tested as if they've had coronavirus, but 88% of that group said that they experienced no symptoms. So again, why is it that one person's experiencing a lot of symptoms, somebody's not? And according to the germ theory versus the terrain theory says that one was a good host for the disease because maybe they had comorbidities, maybe obesity, high blood pressure, diabetes, these types of things. That just says that, hey, the body is in a weakened state right now and is more of a host for those diseases versus somebody who doesn't have those. They're vibrant, they're healthy, they exercise, they oxygenate well, they do a lot of good things, all the things that we've kind of talked about as we've gone through this process. And so as that has become more and more apparent, the really great news for us, I think in general in the chiropractic field or profession, is that this is the message that we have been working for since 1895 to get out to people. That says it makes a difference. Initially when this started happening, there was people making claims like, hey, boost your immune system with vitamin C, boost your immune system by doing this, and there was all of this kind of fallout and drama. Because the World Health Organization, these organizations are saying, listen, you can't say this stuff, you can't do this stuff. Well, interestingly, over the weekend, they were actually forced to retract some of their statements as people basically just shoved, study after study after study in front of them that proved that vitamin D does in fact increase immune function in people and immune response, and vitamin C does have this type of a thing. So it's interesting that, after, they took some flack for that, not that they're going to ever give us a full retraction to that, but for them to basically come out and say, you can do nothing to help yourself. And really, if we think about it, that's kind of that germ theory knowledge. So that's very hard, fast, and steady in the medical paradigm, because basically they're telling you it's not you, it's the virus or the bacteria. So nothing you can do will change the outcome. We just have to focus on killing the bacteria or the virus. Now, I'm not saying it's a bad idea to wash your hands and kill bacteria and viruses so they're not getting into us, but I think though everybody understands the point is that that's two different viewpoints. One viewpoint says it's you, it's the decisions you're making, it's the things that you can do to keep yourself healthy. The other one says, yeah, none of that stuff really matters. It's just whether or not we can get a great antibiotic or a great antiviral or a great vaccination or something into you, because in essence, they're trying to say basically like, hey, you're weak, your body's weak, it can't do it on its own. And so, again, since 1895, the chiropractic profession has been teaching people that really what it comes down to is the things that you're doing on a day-to-day basis are going to determine your long-term health outcomes. Now, there's nothing to say, and we've never made a claim that, hey, come get adjusted and nothing bad could ever happen to you. That would obviously be ridiculous. But I want to just to put that out there because I feel like this is what we're learning. So, and the good news is that within that medical paradigm, more and more information is coming out that says, hey, there's something to this. The study of epigenetics and saying how your lifestyle affects that, which we covered a couple of times ago. So there's a lot of things that is coming that's not necessarily new to us or to people that have taught this and went and believed this for a long time. But it's good from the standpoint of they're having to let down a little bit on that model and saying, hey, maybe this kind of drug treatment model isn't what's getting people healthy. So I want to dive a little bit more into the toxicity thing. So we're going to get started with the PowerPoint here. And okay. So our PowerPoint, the strong people are harder to kill, toxicity. So I want to start off and talk about it at the cell level. So basically, when you take into account viruses, all these things, we're basically 30 plus trillion cells that make us up. And those, and what we are is really just trillions of cells that are just really well organized and communicate well and do everything that they're supposed to do well. And that's what makes you healthy. But really, when we get the bottom line is that the cell is the beginning of it all. So does it make sense that as we start looking at it, it's the basic unit of the body. So to be well, one of my mentors always says, to be well, it starts in the cell. So you got to have healthy cells, because ultimately your cells come together and a group of cells will get together that are similar and they'll make a tissue. And then when you have tissues organizing, they become organs, and then you have organ systems, and then ultimately you. So I hope that the purpose of this is to help people understand that really you are just a lot of cells that are really well organized and performing functions according to what their DNA code and all of those things tell them that they need to do. So the root of it all starts there in the cell. So as we talk a little bit more about the terrain theory, this is the picture of the fish tank or the fish bowls. I think is really a very simple, basic thing to understand. So on the left we have a fish bowl that doesn't look all that hot, and we have a fish in there, and that fish has probably got disease processes going on. Maybe the fish has died a couple of times. We've had to put replacement fish in there. So what's the best plan here? So should we start to try to vaccinate the fish, or maybe change something chemically with the fish? Or would the smart thing, the terrain theory would say, clean the tank, because the tank is where the problems are arising from. So we don't want to vaccinate the fish. We want to clean the tank, and by doing so, we would expect to see great improvements in the livelihood of the fish. And then this bottom one shows a big dump place. And so one of the things that has been a great question to ask people is, did the rats showing up create the garbage, or did the garbage bring the rats? So, I think everybody understands that, or knows the answer to that question. It's not like a bunch of rats started hanging around in this area, and then so the garbage is like, oh, we should go there and appear there. And so if you kill the rats, but you leave the garbage, what happens? Well, the rats come back. And that's just a cycle that says if my cells are sick, and even if I was to overcome that with an antibiotic or something that could kill the rats away, or the infectious agent away, if the cells stay there in that weakened state and they're kind of the garbage dump, well, guess what? It's still hospitable, and it's going to bring on other problems and diseases down the road. So the foundation of Beauchamp's work, like we talked about, was really dictating that it's the body's ability to resist infection that's important. And so although it was cast out due to Pasteur's theory aligning with the medical dogma of today and what was going on back then, since the early 2000s, microbiology keeps coming back to proving about cell health and the environment that the cell's living in. And so in essence, even though Beauchamp was quite ostracized back in those days and told that you're wrong and this isn't right, it's interesting that as a foundation or a principle, if something kind of gets exhausted, then there has to start to look for change. And what do I mean by that? When we start looking at kind of this drug treatment model that we've been doing now for over 100 years, we have to ask ourselves an important question. So as a result of this current kind of Pasteurian disease model, treating it with chemicals and drugs, as a society, are we getting healthier or are we getting sicker? And I think that all the statistical data and all that stuff that we show says that as a society, especially in the United States, we are getting sicker as we go through this. And that sickness is because the environment that our body is living in, the ability for the body to maintain homeostasis or to stay balanced, is being disrupted constantly. And one of the big disruptions are the toxins. So one of the keys to Beauchamp's work was that toxicity and how it affects the cell. And so toxins stress your system. Again, I don't think anybody has, that's not a challenging statement to anybody, but I think it's important to chat about for a second. So I remember having problems when I was a kid. When we drank a lot of Kool-Aid when I was a kid. We were a Kool-Aid family. And I remember and recall when Crystal Light came out. So it was this new sugar-free Kool-Aid. And so we kind of switched, and we would have both, but my mom would give us the lemonade Crystal Light or the limeade Crystal Light. And I started to notice that if I had a couple of glasses of Crystal Light, that I seemed to develop kind of a headache over time after doing that. And, and of course, when you're young, you just, run around playing and doing stuff that you do. So it took obviously a long time for me to kind of correlate those two. But eventually I kind of noticed that, I think it was NutraSweet that was in that. I can't remember exactly, but I kind of noticed and put a correlation that says, hey, when I take this in, then it seems like I end up having, at least a dull headache. Sometimes they're worse than that. And so I made that correlation. Well, I didn't really know much about toxicity and all that kind of stuff, but of course, as we've learned down the road, the pink, yellow, and blue packets are all toxic. They all have toxic properties to the body. And so this was something that, I can tell you that if by chance I get some of that stuff today, we don't consume it on purpose at all, but sometimes you go somewhere or you eat something and you were unaware that it was in there. I feel the effects of that because those I'm very sensitive to that as a toxin. So our bodies were designed with detox systems built right in. I put in there almost like our creator knew that this would be important. And so understand that when we're going to take toxins in. There's no way that we're going to avoid all of them unless we try to live in a bubble, but then you would probably still have the plastic toxins. So I don't know that it's possible to get away from it all. So luckily, our body has our liver and our kidneys and our lungs and our skin and all of these systems that are able to kind of get toxins out of the body that get in either accidentally or unintentionally along the way. So what do toxins do and what do they cause? So one of the things that they do is they interfere with hormones and cause imbalances. So there's a lot of toxins that they talk about that express themselves as kind of, they call them phytoestrogens or obesogens. And there are these chemicals that are in foods and products and processing that actually will go in and disrupt cell membranes. And, the cell membranes have receptors on them to bind things. And instead of binding what it's supposed to, this toxin will bind to it and it starts to derail cellular metabolism. So it starts to interfere with hormones. It can start to interfere with neurotransmitter activity, a lot of things like that can start to cause major imbalances in the body. So these toxins, they kind of induce, inhibit, mimic, and block normal hormone activity. So just think of, somebody who's like really estrogen dominant, or in the men's world, we have low T as this, kind of newer problem that's going on. Well, and although it's normal for testosterone levels to drop, over time as we age, and the same with estrogen and stuff like that, for women, it's not normal for it to just plummet off. And when we start digging into why that's happening, a lot of times it gets rooted back into toxicity. There's toxins that are disrupting the hormone balance in the body, and as a result, the body isn't producing normal hormones. So it can start to affect all kinds of things in the body when that starts to happen. So toxins in general obviously aren't good for us. That's, the definition of toxic, and toxins are things that we don't want to put in our body. So I think it's really important for people just to have that kind of core understanding of, again, we could do a 3-hour class just on the effects of toxins on cellular metabolism. That's not the purpose of these short conversations. It's to help identify some problems and give people some solutions to what they can do to help themselves. So toxins have also been shown to change the permeability of the cell membrane. So one of the things we talked about a few times ago with Bruce Lipton, his biology of belief, and he actually did the research that kind of proved that the cell membrane was actually the brain or the integrity of the cell, because it would either let in. And so if toxins are floating around the cell and they're trying to bind and try to get into the cell doesn't want them. So it changes the permeability of the cell wall. And now the downside to that, obviously, especially if it's chronic, is that now good things and bad things can't get in and out the way that they're supposed to. Cells are still alive, they're still metabolizing, they have waste products, they need to get rid of them. And if I can't get rid of them efficiently, then the toxins build inside the cell. Maybe nutrients that are trying to get in can't get in. Okay, so I kind of use an example. I tell people, if I gave you, a hot dog to eat every day and you couldn't go to the bathroom, I think everybody would understand that, you're not getting good nutrients, can't get rid of waste products. So eventually that's going to create problems for you health-wise. And so how do I avoid toxins? So the first thing for us to understand is that it's impossible to completely avoid them. They're everywhere. And so we can minimize them, and that's really what we're going to focus on. So first thing that I tell everybody is be conscious of the things you're putting into your mouth, on your skin, and in your lungs, and in your mind. Okay, there's toxic thoughts and different things. And we talked again back in the mind chapter about how those thoughts and mindsets and stuff really start to play a role in how people's body functions. And then the last step there is you must read labels. So label reading is important. We have a couple of simple rules that we will educate a lot of our patients with. Things like if it has more than 5 ingredients in it, probably just put it back, as far as the processed foods go. And if you can't identify the ingredients, then realize that they're chemically derived things. So a lot of times you're looking at, the Nutri-Green bar, and you look at it, you're like, man, there's not a single thing except for like raspberry preserve, which was actually just, dried raspberries added with high fructose corn syrup and stuff like that. But outside of that, you probably didn't recognize at least 75% of the things on that label. And so that's a problem. First of all, there shouldn't be 75 things on a label. But if there is, and you can't understand most of them, and then it's like that's something that needs to just get put back. Okay. So we have to know how to read labels. That's part of why we do like our Shop with the Doc classes that we do at our office. When we do recipe night at our office, and these things that we're hopefully going to be able to get back to doing after we get some more relief from the virus. These are education times where we actually teach our patients like, hey, here's the in-depth how to read labels, and here's the key words to be looking for and things you need to avoid, all of that kind of stuff to help them better make choices for them and their families. So the toxic top 5. So I want to give you some good take home, even though you're at home already, but some things that you can be utilized right away. So the first one we're going to talk about is water. So water is obviously pretty essential for health. The thing that I would tell people is that, for drinking it, that it should be filtered. Whole house filters are the best. And actually long term, they're usually they're fairly affordable in today's day and age. So you can get a really good system that's not overbearing as far as price goes. And the reason why whole house is best is because when you shower, if you just have like a sink filter, if that's what we can do, that's good. And I want to encourage you to do that. But when you're taking a shower, that same chemically laden water is coming through. And then when it turns to steam, if you're a hot shower taker like I am, that turns to steam, and then you're breathing in those fumes, and it actually can be even more toxic to take a hot shower in that than it would be to just drink a glass of water. So filtering our water is important. The cities, they have to keep water supplies safe. The way that they do that oftentimes is with chemicals like chlorine and this kind of stuff. So, I understand why they have to do what they do, because if we didn't have certain levels of quality of water, well then, we could get bacteria growing in that. It would get, infiltrated into the water system, and then that could go to, hundreds of thousands of homes in an area, which would then obviously cause a health crisis. So I understand that, but the thing is we know that it's happening. So now we just have to do better on our end to making sure that at a minimum we've got a pure water filter on the tap or something like that that's trying to help minimize that risk. The second thing that we need to focus on is heavy metals. So I'm not talking about AC/DC and Van Halen and stuff like that. I'm talking about the actual heavy metals. So we're talking about mercury and aluminum and cobalt and some of these things most of them all naturally occur in our environment as well. So where do we get most of that stuff? So when we start talking about, in particular, the heavy metals, we think of amalgam fillings. So if you have any of the silver fillings in your mouth, unfortunately, those fillings are mercury based, so they all have mercury in them, and so mercury is not friendly to us. And then the next one would be vaccination. So particularly adult vaccinations. Now they've claimed, even though there's some science to refute that they've taken the mercury out of most childhood vaccinations. The adult vaccinations like flu shot and shingles and the pneumonia shot and all those still contain the mercury preservative in them. And so when we're injecting that, like if I was to eat mercury on accident, so say I had fish and it had a little bit of mercury in it, I swallow the fish, it gets into my digestive tract, my liver and my body will do the best job it can to try to get that filtered out. So the EPA has a standard that says, you can consume, 0.1 micrograms of of mercury a day, and your body will typically flush it. It won't store, and you'll be okay. Well, the problem with the vaccine issue when it comes to particularly the preservatives is that when I inject it into my arm or to my butt or wherever it's getting injected, it's just bypassed all the safety mechanisms. So your body has these built-in safety mechanisms to try to get it out if it by chance got in. But if I inject it into somebody, you can see how it's going to bypass all of those different mechanisms that we use to try to get rid of it. So these things contain heavy metals. They also contain aluminum as the adjuvants, or the things that causes kind of a hypersensitization to the body, so that the body will try to build the antibodies that they're trying to get to be made to help you with protecting you. The last one in that category that's a pretty big one is deodorants. So most antiperspirant deodorants, pretty much, I haven't seen too many actual antiperspirants that don't have aluminum hydroxide as the primary ingredient for that. And again, if I put an antiperspirant on one time, is it going to harm me? Probably not, but again, deodorant is one of those things that most people are putting on daily. And so we're getting a lot of exposure. One of the things that I always challenge people with is with their, trying to tell me about some product, and you look and it's like, oh, well, look at it. It's got, benzene in it, and benzene's known to cause cancer. And they'll say, well, yeah, but it's just a really little amount. Okay. So it's below the threshold that the EPA says that you can have. And I said, well, how often am I supposed to use it? Oh, well, you're going to use it every day. Well, hopefully you can understand that even if it's a little bit amount, and if I'm using it every day, what do you think is going to happen? It's going to accumulate in our body. So that's never, if somebody's telling you and you actually identify something and they're trying to give you the line about, oh, it's just a little bit, don't worry about it, be worried about it, okay? The other thing with aluminum is a lot of people use aluminum foil a lot with cooking and stuff like that. So we really try to get people away from that, as the heat, stuff like that, can cause the aluminum to penetrate into the food. And so then we also have biotoxins and chemicals. So I want you to think, when we think of biotoxins, we're thinking more of like mold and fungus spores and stuff like that. Can be very, very damaging to people. Sometimes people's homes have had old water leaks in them, and so as a result, they've got mold growing. Sometimes you can see it, sometimes you can't, maybe behind a wall. And I know over the years of being in practice this long, I'll have a patient that comes in who's showing signs of mold toxicity, and I'll say, hey, we need to test your house for mold. And they'll say, well, no, it can't be because my husband doesn't have the problem and my son doesn't have the problem, or whatever. And that's never the right answer, because everybody's body responds differently to these types of toxicities. And we talk about the bucket theory. So everybody kind of has a bucket. And if your bucket's big, you can take more mold toxins before it's going to spill over and produce symptoms. So if you have a small bucket, you're going to express symptoms quicker. And so we can't utilize that as a justification of why we're doing something or not. If you're experiencing those types of symptoms, chronic sinus problems, you wake up in the morning and it's really bad, those are a lot of times signs of some chemical exposures in those areas. And then when we look at other chemicals, we've got all the food chemicals, which would have taken, 3 sheets of slides to put all those on there. One of the ones just to be aware of, and I think everybody's aware of now, but is glyphosate, which is the Roundup chemical. Monsanto or Bayer, whatever they're called now, has been in multiple lawsuits over this last year, showing that the glyphosate in Roundup was directly linked to cancer issues in people. So we want to avoid those things, obviously, to keep our bodies safe. Personal care products, our shampoos, our makeup, our lip stuff, our everything that we do to beautify ourselves. Unfortunately, unless we're being very thoughtful and buying the correct stuff, we're exposing to toxins. So they've done a lot of studies, and it's kind of interesting because they say the average woman is exposed between 150 and 500 synthetic toxins daily. And so men are much lower than that, because we don't do the makeup and the base and the foundation and all of these things. So I don't even know why I know what most of those words are. But the bottom line is that we're not exposing ourselves quite as much. But just think about that for a second. So if we're just using kind of the run-of-the-mill average products that are kind of loaded with these toxins, then we're literally exposing ourselves to hundreds of chemicals every day. And, so even if it's that little bit, if I'm doing it every day, there's going to be problems over time. And then the last one that we need to be aware of is food. So there are up to 9,000 chemicals that have been discovered in our food supply. Most of them are going to come in processed foods. And so one of the things that we teach our patients when we go on our shopping tour, one is, shopping the perimeter. I think a lot of people have heard that by now. You shop the perimeter of the store, because if you think about how stores are laid out, you have produce and meat and dairy, and you do have the bakery. You got to be a little bit careful there. But those are things that are at least somewhat freshly made. As soon as you go into the aisles is where people get into trouble, because that's where all the boxed food and packaged food and all that kind of stuff is. So that processing of food, it has to become more toxic because of preservatives and all the things. Like I tell people, if you had a wheat mill and you were grinding your own wheat, if you grind your own wheat, you have a very short period of time to use that flour, or it goes rancid because of the oils and stuff that are naturally occurring in there. But I ask people all the time, well, how long can you have white flour in your pantry? And people are like, well, as far as I know, it will, survive the apocalypse. It never goes bad. So is that a problem? So if I'm doing it myself and making fresh flour, then I have to use it quickly or get it into an airtight container so that it doesn't go rancid and go bad. But yet my flour, my all-purpose flour I have at home, suddenly has a shelf life of 150 years. And so we've taken everything that was possibly good out of it, and that's why it has that type of shelf life. So we just have to think about those things when we're starting to look at our foods in particular, because that's where a lot of the toxins get on board. My job, keep educating and helping people build strong, healthy bodies. So a couple of things I want to cover. Do you think that people that have succumbed to this current pandemic could have had a better outcome if they had a strong and powerful mindset? So they weren't obsessed, they weren't worried, they weren't doing things to raise cortisol, suppress immune function, but they actually visualized and saw themselves healing. It's kind of the challenge that you hear about. I've talked with cancer patients and stuff like that, and when people get that diagnosis, unfortunately, in many times, the only visualization they have are bad visualizations. Like they see themselves like, oh my gosh, I have this horrible disease, and this, I see my outcomes and it doesn't look well. I see myself losing weight. I see myself sick. And we need to change that. We need to have people to have, powerful mindsets to overcome and help in that. I'm not here to tell you that, hey, if you just think, my cancer is going to fall off tomorrow, it's going to fall off tomorrow. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But I don't say that that's what we need to bank everything on, but see how this plays a role in that. Okay. After what we've covered so far, having a properly functioning nervous system, how important is that? Knowing that your brain has a clear communication to the body, that it's able to express itself properly, physiology goes better, and if something comes at it, the body knows how to adapt to it and return back to homeostasis. And those things are so crucial and so functional within that nervous system. And then how about if they fueled their bodies properly? They weren't consuming sugar and processed foods and all of these things that were constantly bringing their immune system down. These are even some of the things I think challenging with some of the younger people that have passed. We covered that in the nutrition talk. Is like, well, were they really healthy, or were they doing what most college age kids are doing around spring break, drinking too much, eating a lot of bad food, and just really, not doing their body a lot of favors. So they still probably had better chances. Maybe it still didn't work out well because of their youth. But the bottom line is that there has to be something going on that's allowed that to happen, because the virus isn't more virulent in one person versus the next. It's the same virus. So it's how your body responds to the virus that we're seeing. And then number 4, develop strong bodies and lungs through proper exercise. We covered this on Saturday morning, and we just really kind of hit home the importance of making sure that we're breathing well, we're oxygenating well, our bodies are physically fit, able to overcome things. So when the demands get put on them, what's your body going to say? Is it going to give up and say, hey, not cut out for this? Or is it going to have the strength, energy, and everything that it needs to overcome and win? Okay. And then last one, keeping your cells at homeostasis by avoiding toxins and detoxifying when necessary. So the first thing is we got to quit putting the toxins in our body as much as we can. But for many of us, we've done that for too long, and our body is kind of burdened with that. And so sometimes that means I need to go through some type of a detoxification system. all kinds of things out there. We do specific things in our office that are designed to help people be gentle and effective and all that kind of stuff. And then you have, you can do the cabbage soup diet, and there's all these kind of crazy things that are out there. But I don't recommend just doing random things. I recommend you getting with somebody who you know and trust that can help you, guide you through that process, determine if it's needed, and if it is needed, what are the things to do to allow that to happen. Okay, so let me switch back here. Okay, so as we're kind of getting wrapped up here tonight, I wanted to just say first and foremost, thanks for you guys for sticking through the 6-part series with me. I hope that it was great and informational for you from the standpoint of just giving you things to think about. Things that, every one of us, there's not a single one of us that doesn't have something that they can improve on. Whether it's a small thing or for some of us, maybe it's a really big thing, on things that we can do to help improve our outcomes with this. And that's really what I want. So the whole inspiration behind doing this was really just to say, listen, guys, we're in control. So understand that you're the powerful person that's behind all of this. The decisions that you're making are going to either bring you the results and reach your goals and attain the things that you want, or it's going to create great difficulty in your life because it's not there. And the beautiful part about it is we get to choose that. We get to make choices. And even if your health isn't where it's at right now, it doesn't mean that I can't start making choices today. So starting tonight, I'm making a better choice. I'm going to actually go to bed on time. I'm going to get off my phone and my media stuff before bed so that my brain has a time to slow down and to get ready for the sleep cycle. I'm going to do things to try to help myself. So it starts now, okay? I want you to know that we're here for help and support. You guys feel free to reach out to me either through the comments. You can email me. Most of you guys have my contact information. Send me a message on Facebook, whatever it is. I want to be here to help people. I want to help answer questions. I want to be able to give you advice to help you overcome and be able to get where you want to go, because that's my ultimate goal. My ultimate goal is just to say, if we had a healthier society back in January when this whole thing started to come at us, we would have not had to have the fear. We would have not had to have all of the chaos that ensued, and the lockdowns and the stay-at-homes and disrupting, our economy, all of these things that we've all gone through. We need to learn from this. If we don't learn from it, then it was a waste and it destroyed a bunch of things and nothing came out of it. So we got to do the takeaway. We got to say, what did I learn from this experience? I learned I didn't like having to stay home. I learned that I didn't like the way my body responded to some of these things. I learned all of these things during this time. So now that I have that knowledge, I need to help myself by making better decisions moving forward. So again, I thank you guys for joining. We're going to have our heart health webinar next Monday. And that one's going to it'll be a little bit longer than these half-hour ones that we've been doing, but we're going to kind of do more of a deep dive. I think it's important, especially now that some of the hysteria of coronavirus is going, kind of passing us by, which is good. But we also know that heart disease was a major comorbidity with people that weren't doing well with that. So it gives us time to kind of do a little bit deeper dive into that so that we can give people the information that they need so that they can make better decisions, get stronger and healthier, because ultimately, guys, strong people are harder to kill. And that's a theme and an anthem that we've got going on. And I think it's going to be that for maybe the rest of the year. We just want to help people build strong bodies, be healthy, and just have full expression for life. So God bless everybody. I hope you guys all have a great evening. And I look forward to seeing everybody real soon on our next event coming up.